Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to build a French cleat wall just like this to store your tools. This has already made a huge difference in my workshop organization. So in this video, I'll show you how to cut the strips, get them up on the wall, and how I built some of these tool holders so you can get your shop organized too. Let's get started. So it ended up working out pretty well. I actually had a bunch of leftover plywood strips from my last project with the French cleat wall. And I'm just gonna rip these down a little bit further to build this one. I started off by adjusting my table saw fence to just above 2 inches. And this was a measurement pretty much just based off of the size of the strips that I had to try to maximize them. I always try to include a verse of scripture in my videos, and today's verse is from Ephesians chapter 2. I continued ripping down the strips until they were all equal dimensions. Once they were all cut, it was time to cut a 45-degree angle on them. So I changed the angle on my table saw to 45 degrees. And this angle is really important, and this is what actually allows for the French cleat. I tried to take off as little material as possible just so I could maximize the size of my strips while still getting the 45-degree angle. Okay, so I've got all the pieces cut now, and the next decision I needed to make is how high do I want to start the bottom of my French cleat system. And I decided on 45 inches because if I ever want to have a work table or some type of work surface below this, that would give plenty of clearance to have items on the French cleat hooks and still have a little bit of clearance between that and the tabletop. So I'm going to go ahead and start measuring out and marking studs. Here I'm using a stud finder to mark out all of the studs, and you can see this is pretty standard. Everything was about 16 inches apart in my case. So now that I've got my pieces marked, I'm going to go ahead and use a countersink bit to pre-drill some holes on here so I can get it secured to the wall. And next I lined it up on the studs and made sure that each strip was level before securing it to the wall. And it's really important to make sure that your first strip is perfect, because that's what everything else above that is going to be based off of. And for this, I'm using my Milwaukee impact driver, which is absolutely my most used and favorite tool in the shop. So this is coming along really good so far. We've got our first one up here. And this sort of will make it easier for us because we can put a little spacer block to evenly space the rest of them on top of this one. So we're off to a great start, and I'm just gonna go ahead and continue to put these up. And also, just for reference, I'm using these Grip-Right 2.5-inch construction screws. I think this is a good length to make sure that this is really well secured into the wall. And I'm just using a basic countersink bit set that I got from Lowe's. I think it's Cobalt brand. Next, I cut some small strips off a piece that already had a 45-degree angle on it. And I'm going to use these as spacers to line up each of the additional strips. From here, I just worked my way up the wall, making sure that each of the strips was equally spaced using the spacers, checked for level, and made sure I was securing into the studs. And finally, you can see I've made it to the top strip. I tried to make this at a height where I could reasonably reach the top one, even if there was a small table in front of it. All right, so we finally got our French cleats up on the wall, and now it's time to actually build the tool holders. So my designs honestly are not the most creative. There's some people who have some really awesome stuff. Check them out on YouTube. There's a lot of great tutorials for it. For me, it was really about being practical, being quick, getting stuff up on the wall. I wasn't as worried about the woodworking methods. But I'll show you what I did for these, just kind of walk you through the basic steps and show you sort of the thought process behind each of these. So I think a good one to start with is this impact driver drill combo. So here's the tool holder finished. I actually initially had tried to countersink and drill into some pieces of plywood. That did not end up working. I think the screws I had were a little bit too long, but just in general with plywood, I don't think that was the best option. So what I would recommend doing, and what I did, is honestly just gluing it on here and making sure that you have some weight on it so that glue has a chance to dry and set correctly. Should be plenty strong to hold a drill or driver, which is what I'm using it for. If you did want to add a little bit more support, you could also just drill through and use dowels or something like that that's not going to actually split your plywood. Now, how did I build this? So the way that I like to do, I start off by just getting a piece of plywood, or it could really be any type of wood, it doesn't have to be plywood, that is large enough to fit your tools. So in my case, I just laid these out on some plywood, figured out how big are they going to be, marked out, generally speaking, where I was going to need a little support, and that was the piece of plywood that I cut. From there, I just cut these little scrap pieces of plywood, glued them on, and then on the back, this is where the French cleat actually comes into play. You can see I have this piece on here that has a 45-degree angle cut on it, and that is what allows it to sit in the French cleat. And I just use countersink these screws in. You're going to want to make sure those heads are definitely sunk in, otherwise it's not going to sit correctly on the wall. And then secure that to your plywood on the front. And that's pretty much all there is to it. This is a pretty simple design. And I just want to give you a quick tour of some of the other holders. This was pretty much just a tray that I already had. It was like one of my first projects that was just brad nailed together, nothing fancy. But essentially all this is one board on the bottom, and then you can see I have some boards around the outside. I secured that to some plywood in the back, and then that's connected to another piece of plywood that has a 45-degree angle and sits in the French cleat. For the nailer, this was very similar to the drill driver combo. And once again, this is just a piece of plywood in the back, has a few supports glued on the front, and then that French cleat piece on the back. The jigsaw, very similar to the router, just made this little, these were all scrap pieces that I already had pretty much. Just a little box around the outside, and then I drilled a hole in the bottom for the jigsaw blade. And like you can see, I am not a perfectionist. Like I said, it's all about just getting it up on the wall for me. And this is actually my favorite one, especially if you have a lot of hand tools that use like this grip style. This one's pretty cool. And this was inspired by another video that I saw on YouTube. And I actually have a whole dedicated video to this that I will link. But basically all this is, you have your 45-degree piece in the back, but in the front, you have sort of this L shape with a little wedge. This is just a little corner of a 2x4. But this works really, really well for those grip style cordless tools. So you can actually use this for a number of different things. I have another one here for the flashlight. You can see that fits in there pretty nicely as well. And you can also use this for the drill. Like I said, you could use it for the nailer too. Anything that has that grip style with especially that has a battery at the bottom, like it won't work with this Milwaukee one because it's the battery section at the bottom isn't larger. But this has been, really, really good. I'm probably going to make a few more of these. I already have 2, but I plan to make more because these are really, really convenient and don't take up much space either. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the tool holders that I've built. Like I said, my designs are definitely not the most creative, not the best. Hopefully they'll evolve over time. I'm sure they will. And I obviously have a lot more tools to get up on the wall, especially like little hand tools, hammers, screwdrivers, all that type of stuff. But I would recommend, if you want to look for ideas, there's some great videos on YouTube. Also check out Pinterest. There's a lot of great ideas on there, and Etsy as well. People who sell them, a lot of times the designs are pretty simple, and if you just take a look at it, you can build it yourself. So that's what I intend to do moving forward. And like I said, for me, I'm not a perfectionist. It's really just about getting it up on the wall and organizing the rest of my space so I can build the projects that I'm really excited about. One other quick note that I wanted to add is you'll see a lot of people will use plywood behind their French cleats. And here I did not do that. I just have drywall behind here that was already on the wall. Now, certainly you can use plywood, and it's probably going to be a little bit sturdier, and obviously you're not going to have the possibility of dinging up your wall. For me, this is a garage space. I wasn't too worried about that, but it was also a budget concern for me to not have to go get another piece of plywood and spend the additional money on that, which quite honestly I don't think is really necessary. I have a garden tool French cleat wall that I use extensively, and now I'm starting to use this one. And having the drywall behind there has never been an issue for me. So just a quick note, if you're looking at different designs and comparing things, you may not need that plywood behind there, even though a lot of other people do use it. Thank you so much for checking out today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, please make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe to this channel if you want to see more similar content in the future. Thank you so much.